Welcome to Let's Talk Ed with Professor Chris, the best college podcast, where I continue to explore the big questions about education and careers. And talking about big questions, I'm about to deal with one today. But most importantly, this is the podcast that is empowering minds one episode at a time. I am still your host, Professor Chris, and the author of Getting the Most Out of Your College Experience. Please do get a copy of this book. Well, our topic today is going to be beyond borders navigating the U.S. as an international student. Yes, beyond borders navigating the U.S. as an international student. And I'll tell you why I picked this topic. Of course, there's a lot that is going on there about international students, immigrations, policies, and what have you. And now, actually, people are asking the question of, what is an international student? What is the big deal? Why are there so much in the news these days? And what is going on? So, I want to take this opportunity to actually do two things. This part is going to be in two parts. First part will be very briefly explaining who an international student is, what they do, who they are, so we have a better perspective of who an international student is. The second part of this podcast is going to be for my international students in this current climate, how to navigate, right? So we can stay out of trouble, so we can focus on our agenda, and that is what we came here to do. But first, I do like to put out a disclaimer very quickly. This podcast, as you know, is all about students, mainly college students. I barely touch on high school, and I don't even do graduate students. It's mainly undergraduate, college, and I stay focused and I stay on track on that. So a very quick disclaimer on this episode of this podcast. I already told you what our title is. My disclaimer is that this topic is, I'm going to try and stay away out of the politics. I'm going to stay out of immigration policies and what have you. There is nothing I can do to change that. I'm not in that realm. I don't have the power to do anything with policies or immigration. But what I can do is use my little platform, my little Let's Talk Ed with Professor Chris platform to bring some awareness to this topic. That's all I want to do. So that's my little disclaimer. With that, let's dive right into the real world experiences of international students in the US. And as I mentioned, hopefully I can address some of the risk they take, yes, what they are entitled to, and what support systems are out there for them to navigate those waters. All right. So let's start with this. Who is an international student? What is an international student? Why all of a sudden we hear so much about them and they are in the news? I'm going to do this in a very slightly different way. I'm going to start off with my personal definition of who an international student is. My personal definition of an international student is a student who makes a conscious effort and sacrifice to leave his or her own country, family, friends, and everything they have known in an effort or the hopes of better opportunities with little or no thought of what is going to take. And this is what I mean by that. So every time I say a student who makes the conscious effort and sacrifice, people immediately think, what do you mean sacrifice? It's a great opportunity for international students to come to the U.S., to get an education, to have better living. And while all that is true, two things can also be true. That doesn't mean they didn't sacrifice to come here, leaving everything they've known, friends and family. So I want to be very, very clear with that. And again, two things can be true. Yes, they are sacrificing, and yes, there are opportunities here. Great opportunities. Again, it's not just the US, sometimes in Europe, that people outside those countries have to come to the land that is flowing with milk and honey. But all that glitters is also not gold. All right? So I've shared my story many a times. Maybe this is the 10th time sharing that, but again, it brings the opportunity to do that again. So I will do that very quickly. When I talk about sacrifices, living in the country, family and friends that you don't know, in my case, once again, it was about 6,000 miles away as the crow flies, right? That means you draw a straight line from West Africa to the US, we're talking about 6,000 miles. I had to do the same thing. The sacrifice that I talked about, the friends and family that I mentioned, and unfortunately, actually, that was also the last time I saw my grandmother. So again, I'm not trying to take away from the opportunities that we have or international students have, right, again, to come to the US, but both things can be true, and I just want to bring some awareness to that as well. Okay. So now that I've given you my definition of international students, let's look at what is documented as to what an international student is. Very quickly, an international student is one who applies to come to the US, and I'm going to stick with the US, but again, some European countries have the same, but I'm going to stick to the US. Apply to come to the US to further the education, and it could be two different ways, either going to a community college, which will be 2 years, or going to a four-year institution, which is 4 years. When those students apply for a visa to do that, they are classified as F1 visa holders, right? 95%, maybe even 99% of international students who you're going to find in the US are what we call F1 status students, which means they apply for the visa, they were given 2 years to get an associate degree, or they were given 4 years to get a bachelor's degree. Then you do have the M1s, which I'm sure most people haven't heard of. It's kind of the same thing, but this is an opportunity to go to a vocational or a very, very technical program, also maybe 2 years. Unfortunately, M1 visa holders do not have a lot of the opportunities that F1 visa holders have. There's a very small number of undocumented, okay, internationals who are also here who might have the opportunity to also go to some of these institutions, but that number is very small, and I'm not going to speak on that. I don't have that much data on that either. But again, if you hear about international students, chances are 99% of the time, they are what we call F1, again, meaning they have 2 years for an associate degree, or they have 4 years for a bachelor's degree. All right. Currently, there are about 1.1, let's round it up to 1.2 million international students in the US. Okay. International students represent a core part of our education in the US. Their presence here helps American students compete in a globally competitive world. Don't take my word for it. This is by Miriam Philbin, Executive Director of the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration. Okay. International students, again, are quite a little bit. They contribute a lot in different ways. Usually, majority of them, you find them probably in trying to attain your bachelor's degree, but most international students actually pursue graduate studies. So you find them in research. Have you been to a graduation lately at a four-year institution or a very big program school where they have graduate studies? Look at the demographic. I guarantee you 75% of the graduates are all international students. And the contribution they provide is amazing, it's huge, it's great. Okay? Approximately 41% of international students who actually graduate either with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree stay here in the US. They don't leave. And I bring this point up because of the contribution most of these international students make as well. Let's stick with international students currently in the program, or international students, not graduated students yet. International students contribute about $50 billion to the US economy. Either through tuition, either through room and board, either through food. And I'm not even talking about the 41% that graduated that are still here and what they are doing and how they established themselves to become great law-abiding citizens and paying their fair share of taxes. I'm not talking about those. I'm just still talking about just international students and their contribution to the U.S. economy in terms of how much they are spending. You will find international students almost everywhere. I guarantee you, if you go to Mars right now, where there's a space program going on, you're probably going to find an international student programming or doing some coding. Yes. Okay. So now that international students have become a huge topic, unfortunately due to immigration and new policies, now we're hearing more about them. And there's actually not a real concern. But I do ask people, okay, what is the biggest concern you have about international students? And usually you're not going to get any. And I'm going to explain why in a little bit. But let's say you're probably thinking, okay, international students are protesting or are involved in this and that, which I really don't find necessarily true. Maybe there's a very small percentage of those students kind of involved in that. Majority of international students here in the U.S. want to stay focused on the agenda or the reason they are here, and that is education, and that's why they came here for. International students don't want to get into trouble. International students don't want any trouble. I guarantee you, you Google, and I try this, you Google, what is the crime rate of international students in the U.S.? This is what you're going to find. It's probably going to tell you international students in the U.S. are less likely to be involved with any violent crimes. Okay, some research actually suggests that international students become victims of scams because a different culture, they're trying to learn different ways of doing things, and unfortunately people do take advantage of them. So international students don't cause any trouble. They are really focused on their education. And may I remind you, when you talk to any international students, the first thing they're going to tell you, as I mentioned, is sacrifices that they have made or was made for them to come here, being that some actually come from homes with very, very little finance, right? Very, very, very little, and I mean little. That some families don't even have much that they have to put up their savings to actually buy that ticket for that international student to come here. So while we're on that topic, you're wondering, how does that international student make it here then? Well, yes. Most international students, by the way, for F1 students, you also have to prove that you can support yourself financially before you're granted that visa to come here. So yes, there's a lot that parents or families are doing to make sure that that happens. If I tell you some are putting up all their savings that they have for their children to come here to study, please believe me, because it is a fact and it is true. Now, for that international student, their agenda then is I have to set a good example. I have to make sure that all the sacrifices my parents have made, I can either repay. So there's a lot that is going on with an international student, which means they are very, very focused on their education to take them to the next level. There are those who probably will be here trying to fend for themselves, as well as brothers and sisters and families back home. So they are engaged, they are focused. There's no time or the resources to be involved in other things. Okay. I could spend hours and hours and hours talking about this topic here, but as I mentioned, I want this to be kind of a very quick awareness of what an international student is, and also use this opportunity to kind of guide my international students on what to do in this current climate. I hope I have painted just a little piece of the picture of what an international student is, but here is my plea to you. If you really want to know who an international student is, what they do, how they manage it, please find just one and talk to. Find one international student, and they are all over the place. Spend just a little time with them to get a whole picture of the real experience of an international student. Or better yet, let Professor Chris know. I can either help you find an international student, or at the very minimum, I will be able to answer all your questions on international students. With that, let me digress a little bit and talk to my international students. Dear international students, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about, again, currently, where we are, the risks, the rights, and the resources you have, so you can please stay focused on your agenda. Okay, let's start with the risks. In the United States, as an international student, there's going to be immigration risks, which means you violate your visa and you can face the risk of deportation or losing your legal status. I'm just going to go over the risk, and then I'll talk about how to hopefully stay on track. Financial risks. This means you got limited work opportunities and you can only work on campus. And I'm sure most of you are aware of it. The high cost of living and tuition. Talking of which, once again, most international students on an F1 visa have to prove that financially they will be able to get through their education here with no problem. And you have to prove that. But it gets very, very expensive because international students actually do not qualify for federal grants. That means if you find yourself in a public four-year institution, chances are you're paying out-of-state tuition, or you're treated as such, and you're coming out of pocket. No financial aid, no scholarships. Some private institutions, because their funding is not federal, may have some financial aid for international students. So that's one thing to remember very, very clearly. International students do not qualify for federal grants. So financial risk could be one of those. Okay. Discrimination and isolation. Yes, this can become a risk, and you have to be racism, xenophobia, or cultural misunderstanding. Social and academic isolations, right, could be a risk that an international student faces. Last but not the least is the mental health challenges. In addition to all the mental health challenges that almost every college student faces in the US, here is what the international student also faces as well. As I mentioned, the pressure of an international student is to make sure that the sacrifices that the parents have made can be repaid. The reliance on that international students to actually also support and provide back home. And their academic pressures that you now have. Academic pressures for international students come in different shapes and form. I'd like to touch on two very quickly. As an international student, please, and I also believe in most institutions for international students, you have to maintain probably a C or better for maybe the little scholarship that you're getting, and maybe also in a private school for that financial aid that you have. You cannot afford as an international student to be on probation. However, if you're on probation, you're still within your status limit. You can still be here on your visa. It's probation. It might extend your program a little because usually when you're probation, you have to take less classes to get your grades up. So that is not a problem. You could either work that out. You could probably make that adjustment. You need to talk to your international student advisor to see, because unfortunately with that probation, you might have to extend your 4 years, or you might have to extend your 2 years. What you as an international student don't want to get yourself in is suspension. Anything that leads to suspension, and usually suspension for international students is mainly based on academics. When you are on suspension, unfortunately, the only way to get back on track, and trust me, I've been in 4 different institutions, and there is no way around this but to go back to your home country to reapply for that visa. The intention is, with academic suspension, you go back and you can make your grades back up and reapply for that visa. Unfortunately, that number of students who are on academic suspension going back home, that process hasn't proved very fruitful, that I know of, meaning it is very, very hard to get a visa again, right, to come back. And chances are the classes that you're taking that you have to improve on, you're probably not going to have that opportunity to take it also back in your home country. So this, in a nutshell, actually adds on to some of the mental health challenges that an international student faces. Currently, my advice to all international students is to please make sure your visas are right on point. Check in with your international students advisors, all right? SIVIS, your student and exchange visitor information system, you're checking on that as well to make sure that you are on status and you're not going against any rules. Talking about rules, with the current climate, you don't want to put yourself out there. And by out there, I mean very little stuff that will bring attention to yourself that will require you checking your documents. And a very simple one is traffic violation. Please don't drive with a suspended license. Please follow the traffic regulations rules so you can stay on them. You don't want to get pulled over by police. Yes, you can get a driver's license. By the way, international students can get a driver's license. However, on your driver's license, I'm trying to remember what mine looked like a while back, but I'm sure somewhere on your driver's license, it makes it very clear that you're not a resident, right? So that leads to further investigation, again, if you get pulled by a police. That doesn't necessarily mean deportation, by the way. I also kind of want to address that. There is a process, but again, you're exposing yourself to more interrogation and probably some challenges you don't want to deal with or have to deal with. Okay. I'm also being told that currently with what is happening, you need to carry your documentation. My suggestion would be if it's a passport, because I also don't want you losing your passport or your original documents. If you can make a photocopy of your I-20, which is the proof of your F1 visa, I think that's good. I think you carry that with you. So again, you have some documentation to present. Okay. Let's get into the rights, international student rights. Thank God in the US, international students, so far as legal rights go, you do have the right to due process. Okay? You do have the right to due process. So that means even if your visa is in jeopardy, it's not an automatic decision on what the next step is going to be. You're going to have some day in court, right? But you do have the right to due process. You also have the right to report workplace abuses. Sometimes I know international students get involved with whatever it is, and maybe because you're not aware that you do have some rights, don't want to report anything. Oh, I don't want to get in trouble because I don't know the rules and laws. No, you have the legal right to report abuses. Campus rights. That is probably one of the places where your right is the same across the board as everyone on that campus. It's the reason why you are here. So you are protected. You have access to academic accommodations. You have the right to appeal decisions and access campus resources, just like everyone else. Work and internship rights. So there's two things. There is the CPT, Curriculum Practical Training, which as an international student, I'm sure you could get while you're on campus. That means you're actually working with some advisor on your campus to work with a partner, an industry partner outside where you can actually go and work off campus. The only difference is because of your status, you probably have a weekly report, a monthly report, but it is tied to your program. That happens during the time you're studying. And then there's the practical training. Of course, again, international students, you know what practical training is. That means you're actually given the opportunity after your degree, whether it's an associate or a bachelor's, master's, doctorate, you're given an opportunity for about a year to use that degree. And the right you also have is the freedom of speech and religion. You have the same protection as domestic students under the US law. Where I caution you is not taking it too far, all right? That means, once again, get involved in a protest that could get you into trouble. Probably you don't want to do that, okay? Now, let's talk about rights that you do not have. Rights that international students don't have. Voting rights. International students do not have voting rights. As I mentioned, federal. You're not getting federal loans, so you don't have federal privileges. It's as simple as that, right? If that was the case, you would get federal, state, all those opportunities. But you don't do that, so you don't have the right to vote. You have limited rights to work. As I mentioned, your chance of working is a CPT, curriculum practical training, which you could do. But outside that, you cannot just go into the next McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King to work. Your working with F1 visa is restricted to your campus. Limited access to public benefits. Yes, once again, we're talking federal. That means even food stamps, you do not qualify for food stamps. You don't have a right to permanent residency. You don't. Your visa status does not give you the right to stay in the U.S. permanently. They are the process. And we'll talk more about that. But again, for F1 visa, it doesn't guarantee you that right. Okay? And unfortunately, you're also vulnerable to immigration policies. Your visa status could change. It could be revoked, which is why I say now, please stay focused on your agenda, which is come in here, focus on your studies, don't get involved in things that necessarily could get you, or unfortunately get you in trouble. Okay? Please, I know it's very tempting to speak your mind, voice things up, but you have to be very careful. You have to be very, very, very careful. That's my only advice to you, okay? To wrap this up very quickly, let's talk about some resources to kind of help you navigate these current challenging waters. The on-campus resources. Please let International Student Advisor be your best friend. They have all the resources. Any updates that comes up, so far as policies and immigration policies, they will know that, okay? On campus, every campus has an International Student Office, and I'm sure you're aware of that. Use it. The mental health counseling, as I mentioned, there are different stages for international students. You are aware of that. Get the support and help that you could get. Financial aid for emergencies. I'm not talking about financial aid as it pertains to your tuition. I'm talking about financial aid just in case of medical emergencies, family emergencies. The International Student Office or advisors usually have those provisions. If you have to go home, they know how to kind of help you with those emergency funds. And they are quite a little bit out there, so you need to research that. External resources. You have to know about the NAFSA, Association for International Educators. They put a lot of information out there to give you updates on what is happening with policies. So you want to know that. There are actually also a lot of legal aid nonprofits. Remember I said there are some undocumented students, but I don't have that much information. Most of those students are supported by some legal aid nonprofits. Some churches help students that way. The ACLU does as well. The NILC also helps students in that way, okay? And by all means, with your rights, the hotlines and mental health apps that are out there, there's no restriction on who can use them. International students, you can use them as well. Career and internship support are also available to you as well, okay? Based on CPT, if you're not clear on any of those things here, OPT, again, those gives you opportunity to work outside, but with some restrictions, and you need to know a lot about that. And then, of course, there's the mentorship network programs that are available to you, and there's also a lot of community support. Take advantage of those. Those are your resources. Cultural organization, faith-based groups, as I mentioned, churches. A lot of churches have programs for international students to support you in different ways. You want to research those. So very quickly, again, I know this podcast is taking quite a little bit, but I also think it is time, is deserving. I've been meaning to do this for a while. But my quick takeaways is make sure your papers are on point. So far as your visa, if you're not sure, oh, I was given 4 years, I was given 2 years. What happens? Can I go beyond that? Talk to your international students advisors immediately so you know where you are, so you stay up to date on your visa. Know your rights and ready to seek legal advice. I already told you the rights that you have, and I also kind of went over the rights that you do not have. So if you need to go back to review those again, please do that, okay? And of course, stay up to date on federal actions. Check the news. NAFSA always puts up updates on what is happening with policies, so you want to definitely pencil that in there and check on that very quickly, okay? Very quickly, with everything that's going on right now, one of my advice to most international students is if you don't need to travel, don't do it. Need, right? We're not doing the vacations. If it's just once, no problem. You can do without a vacation currently unless you need to go, all right? Let's wait for the dust to settle down a little bit. There you have it. And yes, I have to bring it up again. Getting the most out of your college experience. If you want to know more about international students, there's a whole chapter in here. And international students, if you want to find out about other aids, as I mentioned, usually in the public institutions, you're not going to get your financial aids. Some scholarships are very, very limited, or fellowships. However, if you want to learn more about some of the opportunities for international students, there's this whole chapter in here. Get this here and learn more about that. Or, better yet, I will tell you anything and everything you want to know about international students. Send your questions to me. All right, I'm going to wrap this up here very quickly. Please, again, send your questions. Remember, if you are interested in maybe not interest, maybe everyone, I use this as an opportunity to advocate for people to learn more about international students. Find one, learn more about them, or send your questions to me. This is the college podcast, the best college podcast, may I add. That is Empowering Minds, one episode at a time. And my advice always to all of you, don't drink beer. But my beer to you, live beer, balance, eat well, exercise, and rest. Professor Chris, I'm always going to be here, and I'll see you on the next episode of Let's Talk Ed with Professor Chris. Have a blessed day. This is the book that I wished I had before going to college. And it's also the book I hope I had while I was in college. Get a copy of Getting the Most Out of Your College Experience now. You can get it online at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, iTunes, and Google Play. If you want a signed copy, you can go to my website at www.letustalked.com. Get your copy and let's continue to talk ed. Thank you.